Hello, everybody. It is August 7th, 2025. It's Joe with the Strange Voyage Files, and I am doing review of this movie, Private Parts. Took a picture of this thing for my background, knowing Howard, if I used something that wasn't that, he'd probably go to sue me. Howard doesn't like anything that's not his being used without his permission, even with fair use, so played it safe. You didn't even see my finger right there. Okay, so I'm going to do two things in this video. I'm going to review the movie Private Parts, and then I'm going to talk about recent events. So this is going to kind of be a little bit of a Stern retrospective, if you will. I'm going to pull good old Wikipedia back up for some facts. All right. So first I'm going to go into the movie. Now, Howard had been talking about doing a movie, if you were a fan of his, for years and years and years. And originally it was going to be Fart Man, kind of this cartoonish superhero that he did a couple times on his radio show. And that really never got off the ground. And finally he wrote his book, Private Parts, which was kind of an autobiography, followed up by Miss America. Now, he's written another book, at least one other book. I don't have that one. I had never had an interest in that one. I just liked these two. In fact, this one is a first edition, and I bought both of these the first day they came out. This is not, because my first edition I had of this hardcover, I read so much it totally fell apart. So I had to go and buy a different one, and I think that's like a third edition or something like that. But Howard Stern eventually does a movie based on his life, and it's pretty accurate, called Private Parts. Now, he touted, he said, being Howard Stern is the greatest movie. It's going to be the greatest movie of all time. It's going to be the best thing you've ever seen, whatnot. Had a lot of hype up to this movie. Did he deliver? In my opinion, absolutely. This is one of my favorite movies. And I will say I was a Stern fan for a long, 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 long time. In fact, when this movie comes out, I'm in the Chicagoland area, so Howard Stern did not go over very well with a lot of people in Chicago. And I'm going to get into that more when I get into the retrospective aspect of this video. But I did have a very close friend who was a Howard Stern fan. And me and his now wife and a couple other people had planned, and we got tickets in advance to go see the movie the night it came out. So that day, I must have been in college or something, because I wasn't working. I know I didn't take the day off. When did this when did this movie come out? This movie came out I know it was in 2020 on there. 97. No, I would have been out of college. I don't know. Maybe I did take the day off. Sounds like something I would have done back then to see Howard Stern. I went and I saw like a 10 a.m. show because I just could not wait. And loved it. And then I'm in line, we're waiting to get in that night. And I turned to my buddy. I said, "Hey, I already saw this." And he's like, "What? What?" I said, "Yeah, I couldn't hold back. Maybe I did just call in sick." And I was like, "Yeah, it's everything you think it's going to be. It's great." And he loved it. I loved it. It was, and it does very well. This does very well. Actually, it's pretty critically acclaimed. The whole cast, the whole radio cast. So Howard's in it. Robin's in it. Fred's in it. Jackie's in a couple scenes. Baba Booey kind of sets up these interviews. Stuttering John is in it as a joke at the very end of the movie. So, but the main cast of Howard, Robin, and Fred from the radio show, they're phenomenal. This could have easily tanked. If they ended up not being good actors, this could have really, 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 really have gone down the tubes. And it didn't. They did a great job. Fred has always been my favorite member of the show, and he plays, how he comes off in the books is, in the very early days, really strange. Not talking to anybody, only kind of talking to Howard. And the acting was really good. The person who plays his wife does a really, really good job too. And that was what's his name? Private Parts. Where's the movie? Where's the movie? Where's the movie? Oh, what was her name? Can't. Looking for her name. No, I bet it's on. I'm an idiot. Mary McCormick. Yes, Mary McCormick. Who was a rising star at the time. She does a really, really good job as his wife. You have, his rise to fame. You have his move from starting off in these little rinky-dink radio stations to finally get to New York. Paul Giamatti as Pig Vomit is unbelievably funny in this movie. When he gets to New York and he plays, he has to go against. And Pig Vomit was a combination of two producers that he had in New York that he named Pig Virus and the Incubus. But Paul Giamatti just plays this great jerk. And Howard is funny and he's lovable. I do remember a lot of people, because remember, at this point in time, Howard's very, very, very controversial. He's doing a lot of crazy things. He's doing a lot of things like having girls in bikinis come on his show and throwing baloney at them. He's rating them. He's doing a lot of things that are aggravating a lot of people, especially women. But a lot of women really liked this movie and said, this is kind of a different side of Howard that we never saw. In fact, kind of reminds me of Ozzy, where everybody thought, not everybody, but all these people thought he was an evil Satanist and whatnot. And then the Osborne comes out and they're like, wait a minute, he's just a lovable kind of, goofy dad. So this movie does come out and it does do very well. People who usually would not have anything to do with Howard Stern go see it because it is this funny comedy, and it is raunchy too. He definitely has the raunch factor in it. He doesn't go over and above. He knows where to draw the line, and Ivan Reitman produces this. Betty Thomas directs it, so it really is. It's a really this is something that's important. This is something that people put money into. It's $28 million budget. It makes $41 million. So, it's not a massive box office draw. Now, if I remember correctly, this is also going up against the re-release of the first three Star Wars movies. I do believe that is when Lucas puts them back in the theaters to kind of gain that momentum, because in 1999, Episode 1 comes out. So I think that Howard has to go up against one of those Star Wars. I don't remember which one it was, but one of those Star Wars movies. Eventually, I think they were released every week. So he does kind of have to go up against the Star Wars movies. But it's funny. It's a great cast. It is funny. It is lovable. I'm looking, again, I'm on Wikipedia. Ozzy's in this. Dee Snider's in this, who was really good friends with Howard at the time. David Letterman does a cameo in there. Ted Nugent, MC Hammer, Flavor Flav, John Stamos, who's introducing him at the MTV Awards, and that was originally Luke Perry, but they have John Stamos do it because, again, he's friends with Howard, and it's really, really funny. John Stamos is hilarious. And you really get invested in the story because you want Howard to succeed. And again, it's a portrayal of him as a kid and not being understood as a kid. He has these ventriloquist dolls that he and I guess he did this in real life. He would go to his grandparents where they were at a retirement community. He'd put on shows and they would he would have the ventriloquist dolls having sex with each other, and he got in trouble for that. And he again, he had talked about his upbringing endlessly on his show. So, he had his father always yelling at him and whatnot. And I had, I'll tell you, I can understand that. My house, it was usually my mother who was the yeller. My dad yelled a lot too. But coming from a house where there was a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling, I got that being yelled at all the time. Being called an idiot and whatnot. That was my house. So, a lot of people could relate to this. It does well. I think it does very, very well in home media sales. In fact, let's see what good old Wikipedia says about that. It just says it was released on video. And it's on television a bunch of times. USA Network, again, this is Wikipedia. USA Network paid $7 million for the rights to air it for 9 years. So it does make money. Again, it's not $100 million, but I do believe he's going up against the Star Wars movies. So 99% sure on that. But it really is. I mean, I don't know if you'd say it's cult classic because it was pretty mainstream, but this movie is funny. It's heartwarming. You really get into Howard and how he evolves from this very, very, very oddball kid to being successful, and how he gains the respect of the people that work for him and the loyalty of the people that work for him, and the loyalty he shows especially to Robin when she gets fired from New York. And obviously that's a little different than what really happened, but it does, something like that does happen, and Howard sticks by Robin. So you really do have it is a heartfelt movie, and it's funny. And again, there's a bunch of raunchiness. Jenna Jameson's naked in this movie. He talks about how he says lesbians equal ratings, and of course there's a visual of it and whatnot. So it's Howard Stern. This is he doesn't leave out the Howard Stern parts of being Howard Stern in this movie, but that's not all it is. And I think a lot of people that didn't really know Howard that much thought that's what this was going to be. It was just going to be, a bunch of naked girls running around, and, that was things being thrown at him. And, he used to do like breast exams. And I think that's what people thought that this was just going to be, because he also did pay-per-views. And that's kind of what the pay-per-views were. And I think that a lot of people thought, well, that's all this movie's going to be. And it wasn't. It was a real story. It was a good story. Really take out some of the raunchiness of the film, and it's kind of a family story. So I love this movie. Highly recommend this movie. I think it's great. Absolutely love Howard Stern, Private Parts, the movie. The book I loved, and I also loved Miss America. So I think my review is it's a great movie. Absolutely highly recommend. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about recent events, because I don't think it's... I kind of thought about doing a Howard Stern, what's been going on recently and whatnot, but figured, I'm going to touch on this once and then go forward. And then probably that would be the end of me talking about Howard Stern. As I said, I was a monster Howard Stern fan. And I got into Howard because of his WWOR TV show, which came out July 1990. So I would have been around sophomore in high school, and it was on. And again, I'm in Chicago, so, and I believe how I caught it was Morton Downey Jr. show was on, and I loved Morton Downey Jr. show, and this was Saturday nights, and then Howard Stern would come on. And it was like 11 o'clock in Chicago, because I believe it was midnight in New York. They really kind of wanted to tuck it away. And it was on at the tail end of competing with Saturday Night Live, and it was beating Saturday Night Live a lot of the time. But either me or my dad found this show. Now, it's definitely up my alley at the time. Howard at the time, his persona is a rocker. Fred is in a band, and he's a rocker. Baba Booey likes a lot of the same music that I like, especially in the classic rock era. Stuttering John Melendez is in a heavy metal band. This is Howard Stern screams hard rock, heavy metal. So, to watch the Morton Downey Jr. show and then see this guy with long hair, and I'm sure the advertisements, during the Morton Downey, stick around for Howard Stern, had girls running around in bikinis. And of course, when you're, 15 years old, you're going to stick around for girls in bikinis. And I don't remember if it was because my dad would watch Morton Downey 2 with me. I don't know if we saw it together or I found it or he found it. I kind of think he found it and like called me in the room. He's like, you got to see this show. You got to see this show. Because my dad would also watch girls running around in bikinis, even at his age at that time. But so somehow we see the WWOR show and we're hooked. Absolutely hooked. Now, Stern we don't know who Howard Stern is. This is before the internet. He's not in Chicago yet. He may have been in Philadelphia at this point. I don't know. I don't think his radio show is in LA at this point in time. Could be wrong. But I think the WWOR show is what introduced him to the vast majority of people outside the New York, New Jersey, that the East Coast area. And I did see, I think it was 42 markets. God, I had it. 65 markets across the country. So this is just unbelievable, exposure for him. And this, I think, is kind of where the ball starts rolling to get his show syndicated around the country. And I'll go to my grave saying the WWOR show is one of the best shows I've ever seen in my entire life. It gets canceled because WWOR says they don't have the money for the production costs and whatnot. Howard says that it was his decision to cancel the show. He's also said on his radio show that Lorne Michaels put a lot of heat on, I guess, WWOR because he was really poised to consistently beat Saturday Night Live. And for this little show on a superstation to beat Saturday Night Live was a big thing. So there's a lot going on. I'm sure Howard didn't, Howard probably, as the show got successful, wanted more money in WWOR. Didn't have them. I'm sure there were a lot of factors, but regretfully, it does get canceled and never gets officially released. Now, you can go on eBay. I think they're all still on YouTube, the episodes, but people are selling the bootleg copies on eBay. I got to get one of those. I got to do that soon. But this has never been, and it's been brought up to Howard a million times to release the WWOR show, and he's always kind of given excuses as to why he hasn't done it and why I don't know if he'll ever do it. But you can get bootleg on, they're on eBay if you want them, and I think the standalone shows are on YouTube. So for me, eventually Howard makes it to Chicago, and he talks at great length about this, I believe, in Private Parts, where a guy named Larry Wirt, Howard believes Larry Wirt set him up for failure because he comes into Chicago, and I remember this, he's on an AM station. He's like, why am I an AM here? And Larry Wirt wanted to set him up for failure so the Chicago disc jockeys wouldn't be beaten by Howard Stern. I guess Larry, I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but Howard does come to Chicago, and I'll tell you, man, I mean, I was a Stern fan like that, and being in Chicago, being a big fan of a DJ from New York did not go over very well with people. And I mean, I remember almost getting into fights with people over arguing about Howard Stern. And then he's kicked off. Something happens. He leaves or he gets kicked off of AM. He's gone for a while. Mancow Muller comes in, who I do listen to while Stern's gone. And the first thing I think about Mancow is this guy's a Stern clone, and Howard's called him a Stern clone multiple times. This guy is just Howard Stern, different version of Howard Stern. Howard Stern does finally come back to Chicago and stays. And I don't know if he comes back and then has to switch stations. There's a whole thing. He's at a few stations, but he's finally back in Chicago until he goes to Sirius XM. So, again, I'm just always a longtime fan. I think he's hilarious. He does the CBS show eventually on E, or the E show, whatever that was called. It was the E show, but I think it was produced by CBS. And I watched that religiously, and that's just the radio show. People were hoping it was going to be a skit show again, like the WWOR, but it wasn't. But it was still extremely successful. So, we're watching that. And Howard's appeal was, he really was everyman. Yeah, he's a multimillionaire. But, yes, a lot of people, especially for me at that time, seeing girls run around in bikinis and whatnot and all that was phenomenal for me. But when you get to, like, where I am now, my age now, 45 and older, and yeah, I'm sure a lot of the guys were watching for the girls in bikinis too. But also, he was a husband and father who had the same problems we did. You're fighting with your wife. Your kids are driving you crazy. And I remember and I think he writes about it in his book where all he wants to do is go in the basement, turn on Beverly Hills 90210 and pretend he's one of the gang of 90210. And that is what appealed to people. Because, a lot of people who were out living regular lives that had families love their families. We all love our families. But, we'd all like to go lock ourselves somewhere and pretend we're part of the 90210 gang. And especially women. He was much more popular with men than with women. But there were a lot of women who, in the 45 and older category, again, the younger women that loved him probably was because he was popular and hip at the time. But the women 45 and older probably liked him for the same reason the men did that were 45 and older. They too would like to go and hide in the basement and pretend they're part of the 90210 gang. So he related to everyone. So he runs for governor in New York. That's funny. He does make a difference in the both the New York and New Jersey governor elections. He endorses candidates that win. He is extremely, extremely, extremely influential. And I remember the news was saying when they were talking about elections in New York, New Jersey, and the surrounding area, the news would say there is a Howard Stern factor. There is absolutely a Howard Stern factor that needs to be acknowledged. So he made a lot of impact. Never becomes governor of New York. It's not because he doesn't want to disclose his earnings or something like that. And then I think he would have had to go off the air for fair time use or something like that. And he gave up. And people have been talking about in their videos, and they say, they're getting the parties all screwed up. He was a libertarian. He ran on the libertarian ticket, but his lieutenant governor was somebody who was a Democrat. So he was going to come in and do a few things and then leave, and then the Democrat that was running as his lieutenant governor was going to take over. But anyway, things change. And the biggest change with Howard Stern was his divorce from Allison. It's always been kept very quiet. There's been a ton of speculation. I don't know if we'll ever know, because I can guarantee you everyone that works with Howard has to sign a non-disclosure agreement. So the intricate details of why he got divorced, there's, again, a ton of speculation I'm not going to go into because I have no idea what really happened. He ends up getting divorced. Then he goes into Hollywood mode. Right after he divorces Allison, or they separate, he starts dating actresses, he starts dating models, and he goes from Oh my God, I had to watch the kids, and the baby threw up over here, and there's this, and oh, we got to get a crib, and we got to do this, that, and the other thing too. Oh, I went out with Angie Everhart. And now I'm going out with this model, and now I'm going out with that model, and I don't want to. I don't know if I should go to Nobu tonight. People start to lose connection with him. He starts to become all those other DJs. Now, what does keep a lot of people is he's still doing these funny things. He's still doing these crazy antics and whatnot. And so that does keep a lot of people, but that personal connection is starting to be chiseled away. Then he moves to Sirius XM. Okay. And he brings a ton of followers. I mean, it's almost like almost everybody gets a Sirius XM subscription with Howard. In the first few years at Sirius XM, he really, I mean, I remember the first day, I think they did a thing of how many times they could say the F word on Sirius XM. I mean, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy the first day, the first few days on Sirius XM. As time goes on, Howard starts to change his format a bit. Now, I get it. I think he's 71 right now. Let's see. Howard Stern is 71. So 20 years ago, yeah, he would have been 55, going into late 50s, early 60s when what I'm about to talk to starts to happen. Changes his format where he's not bringing in all these scantily clad women. He's not being, Mr. Pervert. I get it. Okay. And yes, there's a lot of people who are watching this going, well, you never should have been like that in the beginning. Okay. That's neither here nor there. But it really does cross a line as you start to get into your 50s and 60s and you're still trying to, and you shouldn't do it to begin with, but you're objectifying 18-year-old girls, okay? I mean, it's bad to begin with, but really, really, really crosses a different creepy factor as you get older. So I get that he phases that stuff out. So what's he going to do? He's not going to be Mr. Environmentalist. So now he's focusing on really bringing the big name celebrities in. Problem with that is he spent an entire career bashing a lot of these big name celebrities, and now he's mending fences. A lot of people say kissing butt to people he spent years tearing apart. And so the show changes. Jackie's gone over contract dispute. I think that was another big hit. I think when Jackie left, it was a big change in dynamic. It was always the Howard Stern show, but he really, with that team of Jackie, Fred, Gary, Robin, there was really a collaboration, and I do think it's a lot like the breakup of the Blizzard of Oz band. Of course, sadly, we lose Randy, and I'm not going to compare Jackie walking out of our contract dispute over Randy Rhoads' deaths, but key factors, a key person in that organization leaves and changes the dynamic. Probably Dio is a better example when Vivian Campbell leaves. And it really does kind of go from the Dio band to Dio solo project. That's probably a better. I don't like using Randy because, Randy we lost tragically. So Dio's probably a better example of saying when after Vivian leaves, this truly is a solo project. And Howard Stern, while he was always a solo project, now he really is a solo project after Jackie leaves. So that's another big part of it too. And that kind of group of guys, and again, whether you were offended by it or not, that group of guys was appealing. That group of guys that sits around watching everything from football to Baywatch and eating chicken wings and drinking beer and making comments, and that was appealing to a lot of people. And that starts to change. Howard Stern really becomes the boss. Really, this is Howard's show. Then the big one, the Beth factor. Now, I am not a fan of Beth. A lot of people agree that Beth is where the show just totally tanks. And I'm one of them. Because he goes from his first wife, Allison, was on the show sporadically. As time goes on, and especially when we get into COVID, it's almost like Beth is a cast member. A cast member people don't really like. I remember there's one point where Beth comes in the studio with her cats, and a cat pooped on the floor, and she turned to somebody and goes, somebody better clean that up. Somebody needs to come and clean that up. It's your cat. Yeah, you know who that somebody is? You. But of course, that's the boss's wife, and she's a model, and she's got her head in the clouds, maybe somewhere else. And really, Howard drastically changes. He becomes Mr. Hollywood, consistently name dropping Jimmy Kimmel this, and for a long time, Donald Trump that. He really is focused on being this Hollywood icon, if you will, the go-to interview person for the A-list Hollywood stars. There was a point where he interviews, back when he was really Howard Stern, he interviews Julia Roberts, and it doesn't go well. And Julia Roberts is kind of always known for being smug and, I'm better than you. And a lot of people don't like her, including myself, because she's always been like that. And Howard really, he was Howard. People love that. I remember I just watched it just before doing this video. Love that Howard took on, Miss Hollywood. Well, eventually, and again, because of Beth, too, he becomes Mr. Hollywood. As all this happens, ratings decline. He's not the Howard Stern of old. People, especially blue-collar people, are not going to shell out money for Sirius XM for this, Hollywood darling Howard Stern, if you will. Then COVID hits. And I'm not going to go down what people's beliefs are on COVID or vaccines or anything. But Howard took his beliefs and ostracized a great number of his audience. And again, it was a lot of the pandering to Hollywood, a lot of the, following of wokeism. I mean, he outright said, I'm woke. Again, that's your thing. God bless. Whatever. He loses a lot of people over COVID. He's very afraid of COVID, and I'm not going to, a lot of people harp on him for that. Hey, you know what? That's not my business. If COVID, and I'm not saying it wasn't scary. I got COVID when it was first coming around. I got it bad. I got COVID bad. I will tell a very personal story here, actually. I'm diabetic and I'm asthmatic, and obviously I'm overweight. So I got COVID during that first big explosion of COVID. And, I have one of those finger oxygen things. And I'm asthmatic, so my oxygen level is always like 95, 96. And I go into one of the COVID centers. Do you remember? There were COVID centers. And my oxygen was at 88. And the doctor, who's, in all the gear and everything's plasticed off and whatnot, says, all right, I have a call into the local hospital. I want you, if your oxygen gets to, 85, I think it was, or maybe it was 90 when I got there, and she said if it got to 88 or 87, I want you there. They know you could come. I want you to go there. So never told my wife this, never told anyone. And God bless, through Facebook, I had a friend who was a nurse that I had not talked to since grammar school. And I put on that I had COVID, and she knew I was asthmatic and everything. She dropped off at my house. She didn't come in or anything. One of those things you'd breathe into and push up the little ball and whatnot to keep my lungs powerful. God bless her. Not going to say her name, but she ever watching this video, she knows who she is. I love you for that. So I did that. My oxygen did fall to 87 or something like that. Maybe it was even 86. I never went to the hospital because this was the point where they're putting people on ventilators and they're not coming out. And I had, to have two daughters. They were much younger at the time. And and this was me. I'm not judging anyone else for what they did or didn't do with COVID. So before you start raking in the comments and saying you should have done this, how dare you, blah, blah, blah. It's my life. None of you are going to pay for my children's education or my children. So I don't even want to hear those comments. I said, I'm not going to go to the hospital because I have this strong feeling I'm never going to come out. Didn't go. Thankfully, obviously I'm still here. But I had it bad. I had it real bad, real bad for like 3 weeks. So I get, and I just had COVID earlier this year, and I can only taste maybe 70% and smell it like 30%. I get it. I am not gonna attack this man for being afraid to get COVID for as long as he did. That's his personal opinion. I have no say in that. It has nothing to do with me. He made the show work. I do believe, though, that he was so confined that without real interaction with people, he just starts lashing out more. Just starts lashing out and lashing out. And I mean, it is, that is something that happens when you have cabin fever, what's called cabin fevers. You start to get fidgety and you start to get a little bit not like yourself. Let's put it that way. And Howard goes, in a lot of people's minds and in mine, again, nothing to do with the COVID. I don't agree with everything he said about COVID. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't agree with everything he said about the vaccines by any means. And that's all I'm going to leave with that. And for the record, I'll tell you, I've gotten the COVID vaccine on several occasions. Had COVID, had the vaccine, the whole thing. So I'm not going one way or the other. But I do think he had a bit too much of cabin fever and kind of went above and beyond with things. And with COVID, people felt so strongly about it. Again, my view is you're not affecting me. I don't care what you do. You want to get a vaccine, get a vaccine. You want to wear a mask in a car by yourself, wear a mask in a car by yourself. You don't want to wear a mask. As long as it doesn't affect me or my family, God bless, go nuts. I could care less. He loses a lot of people because it's one thing when he was judgmental, and again, not to say it's right. It was one thing when he was judgmental, based on people's appearances, how they looked and whatnot. Now he's being judgmental on 50% of the country. I mean, if you look at our last few elections, they're pretty much split down the middle. So he's chastising 50% of the country. Ratings are dipping and dipping. So now we're at this point where it comes out that his contract is not going to be renewed. Howard, as of this recording, has not said anything. I don't see this as a big surprise. Howard is always, at almost every contract negotiation, he said, I'm done. But I will say, I don't listen to Howard anymore. I was listening at his last contract negotiation. I think it's every 6 years, 5-6 years. And he was adamant because he was telling his staff he is not coming back. And he says it all the time, but he knew he was not coming back. I think he also saw the writing on the wall as far as the ratings going, and he wasn't going to get the $100 million a year that he's been getting. Jackie's long gone. Robin is taken care of. Fred is taken care of. Baba Booey's taken care of. They can all retire multimillionaires. I think that was one thing that he wanted to make sure of. He also does have a loyalty to a lot of other people in his organization. I think he wanted to make sure that either they had enough money to retire and be comfortable or had enough money stashed away with the recommendation to be able to get another job equivalent to what they were doing for him and live comfortably. I am not surprised at all. I don't think this is a tactic. I don't think this is. I think he just knew he was done. And I do think the man is extraordinarily, extraordinarily smart. He knew when the lights were on and people were being ushered out of the movie theater. He knew during COVID, he ostracized about 50% of his audience. And he became very controversial being Mr. Hollywood. Even if none of that happened, he's 71 years old. I think he was done. Even if COVID never happened and things just, it was just a regular Howard Stern, I think he'd be done now. He said he's sick and tired. I think he only broadcasts 3 days a week live anyway. He's, ever since the 90s, since I started listening to him, he said, I'm sick of getting up at 4 a.m. I get up at 4 a.m. for my job. I do. I'm sick of it. I have 11 more years before I can retire, and I'm constantly sitting there going, how am I going to get up at 4 a.m. for the next 11 years? I get it. He was getting up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning to go do the show. I get it, man. 71 years old. I'm 51. I will retire at 62, hopefully. There's no way in hell I could see myself being 71 years old, getting up at 4 a.m. and doing this. So I get it. I don't think he's been canceled. I don't think he's not Mr. Popular by any means. If he was 50 years old, then I would agree that this was he was being canceled. No. I think I don't know if he's walking out on his terms, and that's how he'll definitely play it. He's not getting the money. He doesn't have the viewers, he doesn't have the listeners, he doesn't have the acclaim that he once had. So either way, I think this would have been the time Howard was leaving no matter what. One other thing I always think about what I'm going to do in saying these videos, and then I forget a lot of it. The Whack Pack. I always felt, and this is just my 2 cents, there are people, especially certain people that have been with him for now going on, 30 years in his Whack Pack, that I sure as hell hope, if he hasn't already, he takes care of. Especially as some of these people are now in their 60s. And the first names that come to mind are Wendy. Wendy is a special needs woman who at one time, not that long ago, said that she and her mother were homeless, living in their car, and parked in a Cracker Barrel parking lot. Now, Wendy has been on the Stern Show for decades. This man makes $100 million a year. She has been on, and I will use the word exploited, for a long time. I don't know. I don't believe any of them get paid. My view. You could throw $5-10 million at this woman and not think about it. Get her a nice house. Her mother is obviously got to be in her 70s or possibly 80s. I don't know. But it's got to be in her 70s. Because her mother's been taking care of her ever since we've been hearing about Wendy. Get this woman I'm not saying a mansion, but get her in a good neighborhood, a home or a townhome, and get her care because her mother takes care of her. What's going to happen to her when her mother passes away? And I believe Wendy, when she was on Stern Show saying they were in the parking lot of a Cracker Barrel, the mother went through the money she has. She's taking care of her daughter. Mr. I have a mansion everywhere. Yes, you've exploited this woman. Throw her a couple million, take care of her for the rest of her life. Won't even matter to you. You can only imagine what Beth wastes money on. Oh, and for Beth and her charity, her cat charity, nothing against helping cats. Stern is the biggest hypocrite in the world. Timmy the cat. All I'm going to say. And there's a Fred. There's a Fred who was in the Whack Pack as well. Not Fred Norris, but Fred who was in the Whack Pack, who also developmentally delayed. He's been with you again for 30 years. Take care of the guy. Take care. There are some people in the Whack Pack that are like alcoholics, and they're Kevin Keith Kallenbach, I believe, had he passed away, serious run-ins with the law, and I think there are other people who have too. I'm not saying to do anything for them. But people who have been with you this long, especially those people that you've had on the show because of their developmental delays, I think it's time to start writing some checks. My 2 cents. These are people who they've given a lot to you. He may. I don't know. Because there are a lot of people that do say Howard Stern is very generous. A lot of people say he is the stingiest human being on the planet. Other people say he is extremely charitable. So I could be barking up the wrong tree. Maybe he is doing this. And God bless you, Howard, if you are. And I apologize if you are. I just don't understand how the woman's calling from a car in a Cracker Barrel parking lot if you are. Trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, I'm really not a fan of Beth. I really do think she was a big part of why things went downhill. I think her lust for wanting to be a Hollywood celebrity really pushed him to do a lot of this stuff. I don't like her. I hope to God, and again, Stern is very private with his ex-wife and his daughters. Now, there's been a lot of talk that, especially one of his daughters, and I remember which one, do not like Beth. Whether, again, this is all chatter, whatnot. I would hope that he has it stone cold in his will that his 3 daughters get the bulk of his money. And it doesn't go to Beth. Even if he had to do a will after the one she knows about, a secret will, which would override that one. Because when we did our will for our kids, one of the things that the lawyer said is, if you were to ever do another will with another lawyer or something like that, that's going to be the one the court goes by. It's the latest will. When you do another will, that shows, at least in the state of Illinois, from what the lawyer said, that shows that all prior wills are null and void. So I sure hope that he's not just throwing $2 million or whatever at his kids. That it's the bulk. Here's $500,000 for you, Beth. Have fun. The bulk of my money goes split up equally between my 3 kids. I hope to God he's doing that. But again, I'm just gonna leave it with Howard was one of my favorites. Wasn't as big an influence as Ozzy was on me, but he was a pretty big influence for good or bad. I loved Howard for the longest time. And, when I do think of Howard, I hope that as the future rolls on, I remember him back in the 90s and early 2000s and not this, Jimmy Kimmel buddy, Jimmy Kimmel's friend that we got now. But as far as the movie, I highly recommend. Great movie. Phenomenal. Everybody does a great job. All right. And again, I don't think that Howard's being pushed out. I don't think he's being canceled. I think the time has come. I think he knew the time has come. I think that this is just the time to go. I will reiterate, if he was 50 years old, I still think they would be pulling money back, and that's when I do think it would be he's being canceled. Or he's got to accept a contract with a ton less money. All right, so hope you guys enjoyed that. Like, subscribe, and all that stuff, and I'll see you soon.